Well, good morning, or are we still in the morning? Good afternoon, everyone. So my name is Sean Valeski Oster, and I am a Client Success Manager here at Cvent. I'd like to welcome you all to our session this morning, Scaling Your Event Program. I think that it's a topic that I would say has been very near and dear to my heart over the 15 years that I've been working in events technology. It kind of seems like over the whole time that I've been working with clients, there's almost been kind of this constant spin cycle of, we've got to do more with less. We've got to, we've got limited budgets, we've got limited resources, but we always want more and more. We want stronger events, we want better experiences. It seems like recently, though, this has been even more extreme, I would say, in the industry, kind of since the pandemic. We know that programs are growing a lot. They've come back in force. In fact, at Cvent, we often call the events that have come after the pandemic revenge events. At the same time, you all know it, you all feel it, that budgets have been generally static. We're living in a moment of lots of inflation, so we're trying to do more with the limited resources that we have. We feel it at Cvent as well. We do kind of nearly 1,000 events ourselves every year, and so as we're trying to juggle this, we also wanted to understand, how is the market trying to address this kind of difficult situation that we're in. And so with that, we actually, Conrad is joining us today, so we reached out to Forrester Consulting and asked them to do a study and just really get a pulse of the market and understand how the market is reacting to this situation that we're in. And so for the next 35 minutes or so, that's what we're going to go through. And we're going to take a look at the research that Forrester did and share some of those findings with you. So we'd like this to be, Conrad will share the research, but we'd like to involve you as well. So definitely you've got the app. Submit any questions that you have, and we'll take some time for questions at the end. The many of you that are watching us virtually as well, thank you very, very much for joining. And you've got the option in the Attendee Hub up on the upper right-hand side to go submit those questions as well. And so keep your thinking caps on, and we'd love to hear from you. So with that out of the way, I'd love to introduce our guest speaker today, Conrad Mills from Forrester. Conrad, why don't you take a moment and introduce yourself?
Yeah, no, well, fantastic to be here with you all today. I'm looking forward to digging into some of the findings from the research study.
Thank you. Thank you very much for joining us. I think, Conrad, just to get us started, I think I'd like to look a bit at the big picture of the event industry and what's going on. And so I think, you went out and you talked to the leaders. The first question that we had that we wanted to know from Cvent is kind of what are leaders' expectations for their event program, what's going on out there, and what's the mindset. And what was really obvious from the data right from the get-go is that leaders are in a growth mindset. I mean, it's like we're in a period where we're growing. And in fact, I think if you look at the first three priorities that show here on the slide that we're looking at, they're all really more metrics. They're all about we need to, in this period right now in 2024, we want to hit the gas. We want to grow and scale our meetings and events program. We are interested in increasing awareness. We want to use events as a channel to grow our revenue, to drive our pipeline. And so it's all about more, more, more. Very interesting. If you kind of keep looking, right after that, it's almost like, we've hit the gas, but let's hit the brakes a little bit as well. We need to be smart about what we're doing. And so, not only do we have to grow, but we need to know where every euro is going, what every pound that we're spending is being used for, and we need to make sure that everything we're doing is efficient, right? So I think you can, it's kind of evident if you look at it. There's a bit of a tension that arises. No, we've got to scale, we've got to be efficient about it, and by the by, we've got to make sure and prove that it's all working, right? So if we know, you all feel it, that event programs aren't getting smaller, they're not getting simpler. We've got these priorities in mind. I think, Conrad, to start out, maybe it's interesting to kind of with this, what does the event mix actually look like in 2024?
Sure, and if we just take a step back, the event sector as a whole has undergone massive transformation and change over the last 5 years. You know, we've all lived through the pivot to virtual, the emergence of hybrid as a format, the re-emergence of in-person, and almost immediately that massive spike in inflation. And then, you know, over the last 12, 18 months, we've started to see the emergence of AI, which heralds the next wave of change in the event sector. But the point I'd make is through all of this changes, you know, events have maintained and arguably increased their importance in the marketing mix. So in the Event Trends Survey data from earlier this year, 49% of CMOs told us that events were now more important to their organizations than they had been pre-pandemic. So you know, it's not surprising that we see organizations planning to hold over 250 events moving forward every year. But the point I'd make about these events is that the mix and the range of formats being used has changed and continues to change.
That's interesting. So it's not just that we're looking at like an average of 263 events per year, the more events, but really that the types of events we're doing are different. And so I see it with my customers that there's kind of some channel or kind of events in the mix that are frankly going up. There's other formats that are static or not growing so much. I think, but if I look at least the data that you presented, it's obvious that it's not getting any easier or simpler for event planners, is it?
Yeah, no, and it's an evolving picture. So what we're showing on this slide here is which are some of the fastest growing event formats. And I've highlighted two in particular. So the fastest growing format by some distance is the hosted small in-person event. So just shy of 60% of organizations are telling us they plan to hold more of these smaller, less resource intensive, more targeted, easier to measure the impact type event. You often run as roadshows where you're taking the content to multiple regions and areas. Second fastest growing event type is actually the webinar. So just under 50% of organizations planning to hold more webinars over the next 12 months. There are particular focus for mid-sized organizations and North American organizations, slightly less so in EMEA, as you can see from the top right-hand graph here. I'll just comment on a couple of the other formats on the slide. So right at the top, we have sponsored third-party events. This is interesting. We've got 42% of organizations saying they plan to participate in more third-party events over the next 12 months, as compared to just 21% that plan to participate in fewer. Where this gets interesting, though, is when we start to look at organizations where they're under severe budgetary pressure, so budgets are coming down, and they're choosing to deprioritize third-party events in favor of owned hosted programs. And there's a consensus that comes out through the data that actually owned hosted events perform better than third-party events. Final format I'll just comment on briefly is hybrid down at the bottom. Because, you know, I think coming out of the pandemic, there was almost this kind of like consensus or expectation that all of our tier one tentpole events were going to be these synchronous in-person and virtual experiences moving forward. And that's clearly not the case. You know, what I've seen with the clients that I work with over the last 12, 18 months is they're taking a different approach to hybrid. In some cases, they're choosing to live stream a portion of the content at their tier one events, you know, much like Cvent are doing here today. But there's a much stronger focus on digitally capturing more of that content for on-demand access and post-event reuse and repurpose.
I think that's definitely the journey that we've gone on at Cvent as well. So I think that coming out of the pandemic, we obviously went completely virtual in 2020. And then with this event, we've kind of evolved over the years as well into this kind of hybrid model where part of it is streamed live. You know, for example, this session is being streamed as well, but that we've got a differentiated track as well for those in person. But really kind of a focus on capturing that branded content that can be used, transmitted to those who aren't here, but then also leveraged in other situations above and beyond the Cvent Connect event. And so would also a shout out to all of you who are watching that there's lots of content that you can then, those of you in the room as well, consume after the conference and leverage this part of the journey. So I think I'd like to kind of keep the conversation flowing a little bit beyond that. And for those of you that joined the roadmap session yesterday for the Event Cloud, you may recall Felicia mentioning the concept of centrally owned, but locally or globally operated, as a way one organization was describing their strategy to kind of balance or struggle through kind of this difficult time or this period of growth that we're going in. And so, and I know that organization and some other clients I work with, whether it's, I guess, out of strategy, whether it's out of pure survival, and so many things on their plates, they're finding themselves increasingly in the need to kind of empower other parts of their organization, sales, the field, to carry on some of the tasks of event planning and carrying out their event process. I guess, Conrad, in the industry at large, based on your research, to what extent are you seeing organizations either plan centrally or empower the field to kind of deal with the situation and take some of the burden off of their plates?
Yeah, sure. And what the data is showing here is that for those larger, more complex events, the large in-person, large hybrid, typically they are executed centrally, and it's the smaller, simpler events which tend to be executed locally. It makes sense, right? It's the local field teams running those events that have the relationships, the crucial relationships with local sales, local speakers, in some cases local attendees, so they absolutely need to be involved. The point I'd make here, though, is that those local field teams are overstretched. They're responsible for all of the demand gen activity in their area, sales enablement, local PR, account-based marketing. But what the data shows is the single area where they're spending most of their time and resource is in planning and running in-person events. So anything that we can do centrally to ease the burden on those teams is going to benefit your businesses. And that's everything from plans for blueprints for event execution, event templates, access to centrally managed event technology, events in a box. I'd make a similar point with webinars as well, because they tend towards local execution. And I talk to lots and lots of organizations about their webinar strategy, and what I typically see are massive inconsistencies across organizations where there's pockets of excellence, but different countries, regions are using different platforms for their webinars, taking different approaches. And again, the more that you can do to drive standardization around this and best practice, the greater the benefits that you're going to deliver to your businesses.
I think that's a great point. And I think to kind of keep us moving forward, I would say that so far maybe the picture we painted of the industry in the last couple of slides, last couple of minutes is kind of tough. We've seen that event programs they're growing, but they're becoming more fragmented. We've got this balance of trying to empower the field, but operate centrally as well, while still retaining control of our events, making sure that we are delivering the quality attendee experience that we'd like. And so I think kind of moving forward for the rest of the conversation, I'd like to talk a little bit how organizations are balancing this and kind of some of the trends that we're seeing in the market. And so I know when you presented the research and kind of went through the process, there were really two key trends that seemed to emerge pretty clearly. And so that was one, is that organizations are definitely thinking about their people. They're thinking about their human resources with a clear trend towards bringing those together more centrally to gain an efficiency. The second trend that was really evident in the data was that organizations are then also looking at the technology they're using to manage their event programs and really rethinking it, restructuring it with a clear bias towards consolidation as well. So similar trends in both areas. And I think for the rest of the conversation, I'd like to dig into each one and kind of share with the audience a little bit more what we're seeing in those areas. And so let's start with the first one. Let's start with the centralizing teams for efficiency, and really look in how organizations are structuring their teams, restructuring their teams, how they're thinking about their people. And I guess maybe, so I've kind of posited that the trend is centralization, but Connor, why, from your research, are organizations actually doing this? Like, what are they trying to achieve?
Yeah, so the primary motivation behind centralization is a drive for cost and efficiency savings. No surprises there, right? We just think about the budgetary situation that probably a lot of you are facing right now. What the data shows that just a third of organizations have actually had an event budget that's going to go up over the next 12 months. So 2/3, their budgets are flat, or actually in some cases declining. I'd argue, though, that unless your budget has actually been going up 7, 8, 10% consistently over the last few years, at best, it's probably flat because of the impact that inflation has had. And nobody's getting asked to deliver fewer events, right? So absolutely, there's a fundamental need for efficiency and cost savings, and centralization can certainly help there. There's also another group of organizations, though fast-growing organizations, that we saw through the data are actually choosing to overinvest in events because they see events as a key growth enabler for their organizations. And their motivation for centralization is helping them to better scale and grow those event programs.
I suspect that we've got some of those organizations here in the room with us today. I think on the topic of centralization, so kind of a buzzword that I frequently hear and I've heard increasingly more is this topic of centers of excellence. And so really centralizing in a center of excellence feels like this is a topic that we've heard about for many years in larger organizations, but I think in the customers I work with, I'm hearing it kind of more across the board recently. At least anecdotally, is it something that you're seeing kind of a broader trend in the industry towards more use of centers of excellence as part of the centralization process?
Yeah, absolutely it is. And if we just think about one of the fundamental challenges we face with events is that they take place in functional silos inside organizations. Because you'll have the event team running events, you'll have the field teams, you'll have the demand team, you'll have sales teams, and there's a growing realization that this leads to inefficiencies, and centralization will help to drive out some of those inefficiencies. And it's a move towards more centralized event planning, centralized event execution, centralized event technology management. And in a lot of organizations, it's manifesting itself in the form of a center of excellence. So what the data is showing here is that around 2/3 of organizations now either have a COE in place or in the process of rolling one out over the next 12 months.
I'd say that this is definitely our experience here at C-Event as well, and is what allows us to deliver the level or the quantity of events that we have. So our team is actually structured with 30 event managers scattered around the globe, but organized in a center of excellence headed up by our head of events. And so that's really, it's been, I think, the key that's allowed us to execute the 850, well, I think nearly 1,000 events that we have in the pipeline over the next 12 months. So I think if, it's growing, we've seen that quite a few organizations are either interested in doing it or going, kind of embarking on this process. If someone in the room or watching us today were interested in kind of going down the route of setting up a center of excellence, Conrad, what does that actually look like? What would they need to take into account and start planning for to have that in their organization?
Sure. So three core elements to a center of excellence: people, process, and technology. And it's the people that are at the heart of the center of excellence. And there's kind of 4 areas to think about here. Firstly, what are the key skills and capabilities you need inside the COE? And what's the range of events that you're going to be running? What are key stakeholders looking for? Clearly, with the COE, you're centralizing resources, so it gives you an opportunity to drive out duplication within the team, and also potentially recruit for some specialist capabilities for the first time. So, if you don't have the event tech lead, the event data and analytics lead, it's an opportunity to recruit for those resources. One note of caution there, just think about the role that AI is going to play moving forward as you do recruit for specialist resources. Third element from a people perspective is related to the culture. You need to build a culture of collaboration, not just inside the COE, but with those key stakeholders, those frontline sales and marketing teams that are fundamental to event success. Finally, from a people perspective, training and upskilling. Now, I was slightly shocked earlier this year to read that I think it was just 28% of event planners have invested in any form of formal AI training. And setting up a COE gives you an opportunity to embed a culture of learning and development in that in that function. So think about things like certification paths for team members. Second area, process, and 4 elements to think about here. So what does best practice look like for the events that you're going to be responsible for? So what does best practice look like at a pre-event, from a pre-event perspective for event marketing, audience acquisition, event goal setting, at event, what's best practice for audience engagement, post-event, content reuse, repurpose, event measurement. You need to develop standard SOWs for all of the events, formats that you're going to be rolling out, and ensure that they're used consistently as well. We know that events work best when there's really strong alignment between event teams and frontline sales teams. So it's down to the COE leader to put in place the strong governance to drive that alignment. So that comes through goal setting, through SLAs, escalation procedures. So governance really important. And finally, from a process perspective, measurement. How are you going to showcase the value of the events that the COE is delivering? Third area is technology, and I know we're going to dig into this more. So the point I would just emphasize here is that event tech cannot be managed in a silo by the COE. It absolutely has to be managed in a partnership with the broader operations function.
I think this segues really, really well into our second trend. And so I know that kind of up to now, we've been talking about the centralization of event teams for efficiency. We've been talking about the people side of the equation. We definitely saw that the other big trend was that organizations are looking to consolidate their tech, their event technology to get scale. And so I think that's where I'd like to take the conversation now and find out where the industry is going with this respect. Maybe to get us started, before we talk exactly where the industry is going, let's set the stage a little bit, Conrad, and if you can just kind of let us know, what does it look like now in the industry? What does what is the typical tech stack in an organization in 2024?
Sure. So event tech has proliferated over the last 5 years. So what the data here is showing that for a large enterprise, a quarter of all large enterprises, on average, they've got 6 or more event management platforms in play, and in the process, spending over $250,000 per annum. And what I see with a lot of the clients that I work with is that they've got overlapping, duplicative technology, which is leading to data silos, inefficiencies, in some cases impacting on attendee experiences. Interestingly, there's some misalignment internally around the extent of this proliferation. So the second graph on the right-hand side, you can see that the right-hand side 2 bars compare the CMO perspective on event tech with the event leader perspective. And what it's showing is just 3% of CMOs believe they have 6 or more event management platforms at play in their organizations, as compared to around a quarter of event leaders who actually know that they've got 6 or more platforms in use. So some interesting misalignment internally around event technology.
That's really interesting, and I think it's a very frequent pain point that I hear from my own customers. I think that the duplicative processes, the double data entry of working with multiple systems. I think what I would like to ask is, or I think what I've heard, there were some interesting comments recently from Mark Benioff, the CEO of Salesforce. He was in an interview earlier this year, and he was talking about how in the pandemic there was kind of an explosion of organizations buying up enterprise level software, and that kind of in the next, kind of over the last 4 years, there's had to be a little bit of a reckoning, or organizations are coming to this point where like, we've got all of this, we've got this huge cost outlay, and we need to rationalize a little bit. We need to understand what's using and really be thoughtful about the technology that we're using in our organization. That's kind of at enterprise technology as a whole. So as part of this consolidation process, Conrad, are you seeing that specifically in event technology as well happening yet?
To an extent. I mean, what the data's saying here is that 3/4 of organizations are saying that it's important for them to consolidate their event tech moving forward. There are some interesting nuances around this though. So if I look at the CMO perspective, for example, on consolidation, they're just not interested. They don't see it as a priority. But then if we think back to the data on the previous slide, firstly, that they're not aware of the extent of the proliferation, so they don't understand the challenges that come with that, nor the opportunities that consolidation is going to bring. So I think early days.
Early days, so it's interesting. I think for those organizations that have kind of started moving down the path of technology consolidation, and they've identified it as a strategic initiative for them, what are they hoping to achieve by it, or what do they think it's going to bring their organization?
Sure. So there's a range of benefits, and you can see them laid out on the slide here. A lot of these, though, relate to event data, because it's event data that's going to drive better measurement, your ability to showcase ROI, visibility. And the point I'd make about event data is that, just stepping outside of events for a second, access to audience data for marketers is becoming more restricted. Buyers prefer to remain anonymous until later in purchase processes. There's new privacy restrictions coming into play that impact our ability to capture audience data. And in this environment, events represent an underutilized yet invaluable source of audience data. Yet when this data sits in siloed platforms which aren't integrated with the broader technology stack, it makes it really difficult to deliver some of the things that we're calling out in this slide here. So that's where consolidation is going to help.
What really, I think, stands out for me and what's super interesting is when I first saw this slide is just seeing how much these kind of consolidation benefits really match the core priorities that we saw at the beginning of the presentation. And so, that we need to be smart, or we need to scale, but we need to be smart about it. We need to be able to demonstrate the ROI and prove the impact of our activities. And in fact, I think I will show that again now, because I think if this is going back, so this is the first slide that we showed. So if you remember it, I think we saw that we've looked at these trends, consolidating, centralizing teams for efficiency, consolidating tech for scale. But ultimately, all of this activity has to lead to a goal. It has to allow us to meet this challenge of growing programs that we saw, but with the flat resources that is generally out there, or kind of budgets that aren't growing, teams that are really static in size. It kind of raises the question then, if we're working through all this, how do you know that you're being effective? Like, how do we, how can we know that, these efforts that we're making are making an impact? So I think let's explore that a bit, Conrad. And what I'd like to know is, or, kind of what I think is, if we're doing all of this, and we want to know which events work, which events are driving our marketing, which events are leading to revenue growth. It seems clear to me that kind of the event management systems that we are using, those systems of record, need to be speaking to our business systems of record as well. I guess in the market right now, what does that picture look like in general?
Yeah, so it's not a great picture. And I've been tracking this particular data point across a number of surveys for a number of years now, and the needle just doesn't appear to shift on this. So, in terms of the current situation, what it's showing is just 1 in 5 organizations have fully integrated their primary event tech platform with their broader technology stack. Now, if I want to paint a slightly more positive picture, around a third of organizations are telling us they're either in the process of integrating or plan to integrate over the next 12 months. But that still leaves around a quarter of organizations that have no immediate plans to integrate, which means effectively that all of that valuable data they're capturing is sat in a silo outside of the broader tech stack.
I think that it's definitely something that I hear as well, and I spend basically all of my days talking with event planners and trying to help them navigate the technology. And I think what I hear really often is that people love data, they find the insights wonderful, but if you're an event planner, you basically don't have time for it, right? You're planning the event that you're working on, The second you're done with that event, or probably before you're done with that event, you're already working on the next one as well. So you don't have time to go in and analyze all of that data. And frankly, lots of times, like going through, like you want the actionable insights, but developing those, consolidating all that data is a definite skill set as well that, that you don't have time to develop, or, it's, something that is just not in your wheelhouse while you're trying to do execution at the same time. So if we know that, like, technology integration gives us this, but we're struggling with skill, we're struggling with time, we're struggling with bandwidth, but those in the room would like to develop the use of data and would like to deliver and show event ROI, what could you recommend? Or how can we help them get down this path?
Yeah, sure, Sean. So I'd go back to a point I made on an earlier slide that the event team have to be partnering with the broader operations function here. As you said, oftentimes event teams, they're overstretched. They're going from one event to the next. They don't have the time, in many cases, the skill set to build the type of kind of mature data strategy that we're laying out on this slide here. So, they have to be partnering. You have to be partnering with the operations function. And this starts pre-event. Right? The event team need to lay out the requirements for the technology, but they then need to partner with the operations function to select that technology. And then it's ops that leads on the deployment and the integration. And they can then help to build and deploy this type of data strategy where they're thinking about how to capture data consistently across all events, owned and third party, how that data gets processed, where it gets unified, how it gets analyzed, and crucially, how it gets activated to drive more value to the organization. Event data is really valuable to event teams, but it's also incredibly valuable to the wider organization. It should be being used to augment demand and account-based marketing programs. It should be used to drive stronger alignment with sales. It can be an input into things like product development strategies as well. But where it's sat in siloed event tech platforms and you haven't built a mature data strategy, it makes it really difficult to drive that value.
What I like from that, I think it resonates quite well with the Center of Excellence conversation that we just had as well. I think that's one of the pillars that you mentioned was people and bringing in the right people and getting teams with specialized skills and resources. And so I think that kind of dovetails really. So not only we're doing the technology, but we're bringing in the right people and the right resources that can help us disseminate that. So it's not sitting in that silo. It's not the full responsibility of the event planner to make that data actionable. I think kind of at this point, so we have thrown a lot of data at you. We've looked at a lot of charts and a lot of consolidation. But what I know behind all of the research that you do is, Conrad, lots of conversations with decision makers, with marketing leaders, with event planners. And so there's really, behind all of this data are human stories, human connections, real organizations trying to overcome real challenges. And so I think to wind us out before we jump into the questions from the audience, I'd like to actually just kind of move us into some of the conversations, some like kind of real stories from real planners that you're working with. And so I know you've prepped a couple of quotes, and so I'll show them on the screen, and why don't you talk to us about them?
Sure. So what I've done here is just pull out 3 quotes from 3 event leaders that I've spoken to this year. And each of the quotes talks to one of the areas that we've been chatting about. So consolidation, centralization, and integration. So if I take each of them in turn, the quote on the left-hand side, I was talking to an event leader at a Fortune 500 software organization, and he was explaining to me the journey that his organization had been on in terms of consolidating its event tech. So going back 5 years, he said they had literally dozens of platforms in play, and they took a very thoughtful and considered approach to consolidation. So they piloted and tested a lot of technology over the course of 5 years, and they've now built this single, consolidated, integrated platform that they're using for all of their externally facing customer events. Second quote on the right-hand side talks to the benefits of integration. And here I was talking to a leader at a Fortune 100 tech corporation, so a very large IT company. And the lady I was talking to there was just talking about some of the benefits that they'd got through integration. They were capturing a lot of data at their events. It was everything from the demos that people were doing, the conversations that were being had, even data related to kind of trivia sessions that they were running at their events. And all of that data was flowing quickly and seamlessly to their inside sales team, who were then able to have much more valuable and personalized post-event conversations. And by the way, she also said to me this data was incredibly valuable to the wider organization because it was first-hand kind of knowledge of what was top of mind for customers and prospects right now. And then the final quote down at the bottom talks to the benefits of setting up a more centralized COE type function. And here I was talking to a CMO at a smaller organization, and he was making the type of hosted in-person roadshow format that we spoke about right at the outset. He was making that a key focus for his event strategy moving forward. But he realized to roll that out globally without some kind of centralized function, it was a recipe for disaster. So he's put in place a COE to help him deliver that type of event program.
That's really interesting, and I like that they're kind of from three companies that are of different sizes, different areas in their journey, but they're kind of leveraging all of these principles that we've been talking about for the last half an hour or so. So I guess I would say thank you very much, Conrad, for sharing the research with us. And I think it was super interesting for me. As I've already told you, I have so many things that I pulled out of here that I'm going to bring into conversations moving forward. And I imagine that's the same for many of you here in the audience. And so I think we've got about 8 or 9 minutes left, and so I'd like to take the rest of the time to really kind of bring in the audience and give them the opportunity to ask questions. So I've seen some questions come in the app already, so thank you for those who submitted. Feel free to submit more as we're talking in the next couple of minutes. And I may start with hopefully a really simple one, the most upvoted question, Conrad. So I know that the study that we talked about specifically today was one that was commissioned by Cvent from Forrester, but the audience is interested. The kind of some of the research that you're doing on the events industry, if people are interested in finding out more, where can they go to find out more, and kind of some of the insights that Forrester is generating on the...
So a lot of that, unfortunately, is only available to Forrester clients. I do write fairly regular blog posts where I'll kind of call out some of the key findings, but yeah, I'm afraid that a lot of that's behind a paywall.
The other thing that I would definitely recommend is, obviously the data that we presented today, commissioned by Cvent, we use this. You've definitely seen in multiple presentations we've pulled in some of that data because it really does paint a really great picture of what's going on in the industry right now. Cvent, we have really regular webinars where we talk about salient things in the industry as well, and all of the data that Forrester is gathering, it then gets pulled into that, informs those kind of those discussions. So definitely feel free to check out on the Cvent website the webinar program that that our marketing team pulls together as well. Okay. I think moving on, another really great question that came in. So Conrad, audience is asking, when you're setting up a center of excellence, there's lots of different expectations, different priorities from the main stakeholders. How do you navigate all of those different priorities and expectations? And what do you think the most important first steps to take to kind of get the ball rolling?
Yeah, so for me, the most important first step is to actually audit what you're doing at the moment. So what's the range of events that's being executed inside your organization? What are the different teams involved in those events? What's the technology that you're actually using? So get a picture of what's happening right now. Use that to inform conversations with stakeholders. And then kind of the next key step for me is to actually write a charter for the COE. What's the mission, the vision? What's the value it's going to deliver to the organization?
I think the COE is definitely our top, people are very interested in finding out more. And so I think this really dovetails well into the next question, which is, what are better ways the COE can showcase that value to leadership? So I know that part of it is obviously developing those metrics and things, but is there things that you've seen in the industry kind of tried and true that is, that almost that we could walk away with and that we would want to incorporate?
Yeah, so for me, one of the key areas is actually better goal setting around events. So, clear, smart goals, so, specific, measurable, achievable, all of those elements. There's too many events I see where they suffer from a lack of clear goals at the outset, which makes it actually really difficult to then measure the value that's being delivered. Because if you don't know what you're looking to achieve, how do you know what to measure to showcase value? And that leads to a lot of vanity metrics, things like number of stand visits if it's a third-party event. That doesn't properly showcase the value of the event. Proper goal setting for me is fundamental here.
Because it allows you to basically paint the picture. This is what we wanted to achieve, and this is what we achieved. We've exceeded that, for example, or this is where we need to invest more so that we can hit these goals.
Yeah, and use that to then select the right metrics to showcase the value.
So, kind of keeping on the theme of COE, and so we also, you mentioned in the people part that it's really an opportunity for specialization in roles and the ability to kind of develop key capacities on the team. Can you provide kind of a list of some of those roles that you mentioned some like high level but when you see the most successful centers of excellence that some of the audience would want to consider having on their teams?
So one of the things I'd say with COEs is I've worked with a lot of organizations to help them put one in place over the last 12, 18 months, and no two COEs look the same. It depends a lot on the size of the organization, the range of events that you're going to be responsible for. There's some organizations where they've started to incorporate internal events within the COE. So that's going to dictate to an extent kind of what capabilities you need. But I think looking at areas around technology, data, analytics are really important moving forward.
I think something that we see, or that kind of in my experience when we talk at C-Event as well, is we also see really, like as part of the COE, this emerging role of the event technologist, so someone who's on the team that's really kind of responsible for the technology side and really the execution, so that that it's not incumbent on you as the event planner then to also have to, in addition to everything else you're doing, kind of deal with the nuances. For example, in the C-Event case of setting up a C-Event website, right? You've got that expertise. Everyone maybe has some expertise, but you've really got part of the team that can really deliver that at scale for you. So I think we've got time for one more question, and I actually like it. So you mentioned that kind of one of the surprising things that came out of the data was that the role of AI, and that kind of the small number of organizations that are actually spending any time with training or certification in AI. Do you have any recommendations, kind of knowing what's out there? So if somebody were interested in having team trained or certified in AI and AI for marketing, where they would go and what they should look for?
So I think there's kind of two fundamental use cases for AI in events. One is to drive planner efficiencies, so to help you be more productive. And the second kind of use case is around attendee experience. So how can you use the data that you're capturing and use AI to help analyze that data and use it to deliver more personalized experiences. So I think those are kind of the two fundamental use cases. What I'm seeing at the moment is organizations are focused more on the first use case, so looking for AI to drive planner efficiencies, probably going back to the conversation we were having earlier. Yeah. And a slight hesitation when it comes to using AI for attendee experiences. In a lot of cases, that's driven by broader organizational restrictions around the use of AI. So I'd probably focus at the moment on kind of AI tech to help drive efficiencies. That's probably where I'd start.
Very interesting. I think with that, we're basically at time. So I'd like to thank you once again, Conrad, for joining us today and sharing all of the findings from your research and your expertise. So really appreciate that. Thank all of you for joining us as well, for your time. I hope it was very interesting for you all. What I'd like to ask, if you've got time or a moment, if the clicker will work for me, we've got, if you can go in the app, and then we've got the survey about the session, and so it's really helpful for us if you can just jump in and then spend a moment, take the session survey. That we definitely use that to work on the content and make sure that that every year we're delivering you a great Cvent Connect experience. So with that, thank you all, and have a great rest of your Cvent Connect.